Hi, welcome to Eastern Connecticut Fly Fishing. This will be the first fly tying video, hopefully in a series of videos where I tie and demonstrate and discuss various patterns that I have a lot of confidence in, and it's something that I'd like to pass on to you. Some of these patterns are from Joe Humphreys, who's been a friend and mentor and for me in fly fishing, and they've been effective for him for decades, and they've worked for me too, so I'd like to pass it on to you guys. Today's pattern is going to be Hump's Sulphur Nymph, and it's a pattern that he developed back in the 40s to mimic the sulfurs, and it's been a super dynamite pattern, principally because of the way he weights his flies and the way he flattens them out, and in the way he ties them. They look like the real thing in the water, and they act like the real thing in the water. A lot of today's patterns, particularly the ones that are geared towards the European nymphing style, are very effective, but they're effective for a couple different reasons. One is that they get to the bottom because they're heavily weighted. They have a lot of flash built into them, and a lot of synthetic materials that are easy to tie with, and they're very flashy, and so that keys the fish into them, and that's what triggers the fish to take those kinds of patterns. I prefer to tie more realistic patterns, tying with natural fur and feathers. I'm not looking for things to be super impressionistic, but I'm looking for patterns that are easy to tie. They look like the real nymph in the water, and most importantly, they act like them. One of the biggest killers to fish is motion, and this particular pattern has a lot of motion to it in the water, and it rocks back and forth because it becomes flattened, like I'll show you later in the video. And the interplay of water over this pattern rocks it back and forth, and it really looks like a nymph struggling to get off the bottom and move through the surface column by its wiggling motion, its rocking motion. So we're going to get started here, and I'll try and explain the steps as I go, and the reason why it's tied the way it is. First, we put the thread on the hook, and this is a size 14 2x long shank. If you tie with a 2x long shank, the fly tends to ride head up when you weight it on the front 1/3, which is right through here. But you want to try and not crowd the eye, though. Then you move to a 4x long shank hook. Then the head will start to ride down when it's weighted in the forward section. Now, a unique way that Joe came up with weighting his flies to get that flat rocking motion is he added, or he adds, some type of dubbing to the front. Now this happens to be cotton, but you can also use a little bit of dubbing. And he wraps the front 1/3 with a cotton dub base. And then he adds in some lead foil. Now when this foil is tightened and flattened, it creates a really broad base, creates a lot of rocking motion in the water once the fly is completed. Some of the lead foil out there is kind of thin, and it breaks easy, so you just retie it. Now this pattern is not going to be a super heavy weight. It's going to be heavy to get through the water column, and it'll be on the bottom in a few feet of water, but it's gonna not be a super heavy weight. Now to make your pattern heavier, what you could substitute for lead foil is the various sizes of lead wire to add in that heaviness. Now, so that this doesn't spin, just add a couple drops of super glue to it. Now the next step is add in some tailing material. Now you could use partridge, you can use grouse, you can use Indian hen. Whatever you have on hand is okay, as long as it's got sort of like that mottled kind of look to it that the original nymphs legs have. Now you just need a couple fibers for the tail. The nymphs don't have 100 tails, they only have 2 or 3 depending on the species, so you just need a couple fibers. And you measure the length of the shank from the hook eye to the bend of the hook is the length of the shank. You measure the length of the shank for the tail, tie it in. Now hold the fibers to the last turn. Next, you add in some ribbing. In this case, this is wire. You tie that in. This happens to be thin wire that you can get at Joann's Fabric. That's real cheap. But you could use any of the various wires out there. The next step is to add the dubbed body. Now in the Sulphur Nymph, the bodies are going to tend to be in most places a darker tan, kind of ginger body, and a darker thorax. So we're going to do this sort of darker tan ginger body, and it has a little bit of amber flash in it. Not a lot, but just a little bit. And I'm going to dub the body. Now I'm not spinning this too tight, because I want to be able to have a buggy, spiky look to it. And I kind of want to do a tapered body, so if I need more, you just add more. It's better to add a little bit at a time than to put too much on and make it too gloppy right off the start. I don't tie commercial, so it's not a race for me. There. I'm going to hold the tail fibers for the first turn. I'll just wrap this wire through 2-3 times to get a segmented look, and later on this will be flattened out and really create a broad surface for the water to interplay over. So that I don't ruin my scissors that I have in my hand, I'm using this nail clipper. Now, for the thorax, it's going to be a darker fur. In this case I'm using brown, dark brown, and this is going to be spun on very loose, almost like in a glob. And what that'll look like in the end is a wing case just about ready to pop open. So, don't definitely don't want to spin this on too tight. Nice and loose. Maybe just a teeny bit more. Now this pattern doesn't look pretty. It's not going to look great in a fly bin compared to some other patterns, but let me tell you, this is super dynamite pattern. And it's extremely effective. It's a killer. I want it to be buggy and spiky looking, but some of these really super long fibers I just kind of pick out. And then this is just about done. The last step is to add in the legs. Now the legs are going to be tied in a winging kind of fashion in the front. And you see, this doesn't look like anything in nature with legs sticking out the side of its head, but this is done for a purpose. One, it will look like legs when it rocks back and forth in the water, and then also these legs tied in as wings on the side over the flat surface of the nymph helps plane it out and rock it back and forth and create the motion of the wiggling nymph better. And in this case, the legs on a nymph, there's only 6, so you would think that you wouldn't need a lot, but in this case you want a good clump. You want more than you think, so that you have these wings are sturdy and they hold together and plane out to the side, and you'll see in the finished product what it looks like. So you tie in the wings on the far side with a couple turns to lock it in. There we go. Cut out the excess. The same size clump. Again, this is also grouse in this particular pattern, but I use Indian hen or I use partridge, whatever's available, and measure it. Put the fibers on the near side. Couple more turns on the head just to get those fibers. Make sure your head is clear. And just add in a whip finish. And the fly is almost done. And the last step is to flatten this pattern. Now earlier you saw me put the cotton dubbing on with the lead foil over it and then the wire through the body. Well, it all creates a really, when you mash it down with the pliers, it makes a really flat surface. And it's the interplay of the water over this flat surface that really creates that wiggling, rocking motion that the natural nymph does. And that is the key to this pattern. That's what makes this pattern deadly. And that's the Sulphur Nymph, Hump Sulphur Nymph. Now this glob up front in the thorax is going to look like a wing case ready to pop open. And then you have the different color body and the segmentation with the wire. And you can see as this is spun around, the wings sort of, the legs sort of create a wing and a plane. And as this goes through the currents in the river or stream or brook, whatever current you happen to be fishing in, this will rock back and forth, and it will also go up and down. And that's the trigger to this nymph, is the motion. It's a deadly pattern. Give it a try.